Fernando Alonso was given a post-race drive-through penalty, which was converted into a 20-second time penalty, which dropped him from 6th to 8th in the final classification for what the stewards called an unusual maneuver, which inadvertently resulted in George Russell crashing out on the final lap. In the closing stages of the Grand Prix, after Alonso pitted on lap 41 and Russell pitted on lap 45, George caught up to the back of Fernando and from about lap 50 onwards, with only 8 to go, was within a second of Fernando and looking to overtake. Russell's best opportunity looked to be with DRS on the back straight into turns 9 or 11, which is where he was getting closest to Fernando. However, on the final lap going into turn 6, Russell under braking closed up drastically to the back of Alonso and ended up losing front end downforce, which caused him to slide off the track and crash into the barriers. And now I think it's just worth quickly noting that the aftermath was actually quite scary, because you had Russell hanging sideways in his car in the middle of the track, and if you listen closely to his team radio, you can hear him pleading for a red flag. In the end, given that it was the final lap, the stewards decided that a virtual safety car would be enough. But watching Stroll's onboard, who was the first car to pass them, even though he was warned by his engineer to slow down, he was still going uncomfortably fast past the incident. Whilst obviously it's great that nothing bad happened, after last year when people were claiming that the FIA were too trigger happy with all of the red flags, and I actually defended the stewards in a video, I think it's pretty inconsistent and outright dangerous to not throw out a red flag for that incident and just end the race there. And now it's obvious from watching the onboards and looking at the telemetry that Fernando definitely did something different into that corner than before. In fact, he even admitted it after the race that he wanted to do something different out of turn 6. Fernando said that his intention was to lift earlier with less speed into the corner, but to get back on the throttle earlier with more speed out of the corner, which at the time would make sense. Russell was putting Fernando under a lot of pressure under DRS, and so how you exit a corner is crucial to your momentum going onto a straight. Looking at the telemetry after the race, with the white line being the previous lap 57 and the green line being lap 58 during the race, we can see that Fernando did go off the throttle, then back on the throttle, then off the throttle, and then back on the throttle again, all before the final corner. But to be fair, just as he said, when he finally did go on the throttle for the final time, he did manage to get back on it earlier than he did the previous lap. Now, looking at the brake trace, he also had 2 stabs at the brakes as well, but as the stewards pointed out in their verdict, he also braked very slightly early at a point that he did not usually brake, although the amount of brake was so slight that it wasn't the main reason for his car slowing. And now this trace looks like a bit of a mess, because it's not at all what you want to be doing whilst going through that corner, and the delta showed that Alonso definitely lost time. But Alonso also admitted to the stewards that this was because he made a mistake, and that while his plan was to slow earlier, he got it slightly wrong and had to take extra steps to get back up to speed. The stewards deemed that what Alonso was doing by braking earlier to get a better exit, misjudging it, and then having to go back onto the throttle before the corner was dangerous driving, and that the fact that it was such a fast part of the circuit and that it made the closing speed to the car behind so vast is why it was deemed worthy of a penalty. The exact rules that they said he broke was Article 33.4 of the sporting regulation, which states, "At no time may a car be driven unnecessarily slowly, erratically, or in a manner which could be deemed potentially dangerous to other drivers or any other person." And now I think it's also worth mentioning that going into the corner, as can be seen on Russell's onboard when the red light is flashing on the back of Alonso's rear wing, that Alonso is also charging his battery very early on before they even get into the corner, which slows the car down. Now, this is to be expected because when you're going to be in a DRS battle, you want to have as much of your battery available to defend. But I do wonder if Russell perhaps didn't notice that Alonso was already slowing a little bit due to charging before he even got into turn 6. Because whilst I do get him being caught out by whatever Alonso was trying to do, I do also think that looking at the onboard, it's not as if Alonso stamped on the brakes midway down the straight when Russell was right on his rear wing. At the point Alonso starts to slow down well before the corner, Russell still has a good 6 car lengths between them to react. Alonso was obviously not happy after the race, doing a long post on social media, which I'm definitely not going to be reading out in full, but the bit that caught my eye was the obvious point that, as he has done so many times in the past, And as we have seen him do many times in wheel-to-wheel combat, you don't always drive every single corner and every single lap at 100%, and he was clearly trying to be clever in some kind of way going through that corner, but just misjudged it to the point where he needed to be off the throttle and then back on the throttle multiple times, which is what the FIA decided was dangerous. Despite the fact that in black and white the stewards said, specifically in this case, the stewards have not considered the consequences of the crash, I don't believe that for a second. This is something I really want to get your thoughts in the comments below, but if Russell reacted in time and didn't crash the way he did, then to me there is no way that Alonso is given a 20-second time penalty. The reason why intent and consequence is important in my opinion is because when it comes to Article 33.4, which is what the FIA said Alonso breached, it states that cars shouldn't be driving unnecessarily slowly or erratically, which could be considered dangerous. But then what do you call what Kevin Magnussen was doing in Jeddah? Similar to Checo in Abu Dhabi 2021, when he was trying to purposefully slow down Lewis to help Max, K-Mag spent half of the race driving unnecessarily slowly, doing things that he wouldn't normally be doing on a regular lap, specifically to slow down the cars behind him so that his teammates could build a pit stop gap. In Jeddah, K-Mag was doing it at an even more dangerous track throughout all of the corners, but the difference was that there was no consequence as there wasn't a crash, and the other drivers were able to react to what he was doing, which Russell wasn't able to do because he wasn't expecting it. We have seen drivers drive abnormally slowly all the time, whether it's playing DRS games with the cars behind or holding up other cars to build up gaps. So where is the consistency and where is the line that makes those incidents okay if the drivers behind them are able to react and not crash from what Alonso was trying to do through one corner? And now I'm not saying that Fernando Alonso didn't deserve a penalty, because if that's the standard for a penalty then fair enough. But it just feels like, as usual with the FIA, there is zero consistency when comparing it to previous incidents. And to me, the only reason Alonso actually got a penalty was because Russell crashed. The FIA even admitted that it wasn't necessarily that Alonso slowed really suddenly. It was more so that he was messing around trying to do something that didn't come off. And given that Russell did have a bit of a gap down the main straight before Alonso started to slow, I think that there is also some culpability on his side for not noticing that Fernando started to slow early. Either way, this was definitely a contentious one on social media, splitting opinion amongst fans. My biggest gripe, as I said, is that comparing it to what I've seen loads of other drivers do when there wasn't a crash, I honestly don't know what deserves a penalty and what doesn't anymore when it comes to drivers, quote-unquote, driving unnecessarily slowly. Like I said, let me know all of your thoughts on this incident, and especially whether you think Alonso still would have got the penalty even if Russell hadn't crashed. And if you did enjoy this video and want to support the channel, then don't forget to subscribe, that would be massively appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.